All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today we're going to try to untangle this whole web of international trade.
Oh, okay.
Specifically, looking at the Korean automotive industry.
Interesting.
And how it kind of had to navigate this U.S. market, especially during like the beginning of Trump's presidency.
Yeah.
We've got some analysis here that really gets into how political agendas and like economic policies, tariffs and trade imbalances, and even like how hybrid vehicles kind of came up during this time. It's a pretty interesting story. So
yeah. Sounds fascinating.
Let's dive right in.
So, it's interesting because I think a lot of times we think about economics and politics as like separate things, but like they're really not. You know what I mean?
Sure.
What we're talking about here goes way beyond just like numbers on a spreadsheet,
Absolutely.
These decisions that people make have like real world impacts on jobs, on entire industries.
Right.
Even like global power dynamics.
Yeah, and the U.S. is a huge player in this.
Yeah.
The U.S. is actually Korea's second largest export market.
Wow.
And a pretty big chunk of those exports, like 34%, are automobiles and auto parts.
Wow, that's a lot.
So you can see how any changes in the U.S. trade policy could really like send shockwaves through the Korean economy.
Oh, sure.
And this is where Trump's America First policies come into play.
Yeah.
This whole approach that's, prioritizing American economic interests and like trying to reduce reliance on like foreign goods.
Right.
Obviously had big implications for international trade.
Yeah.
And I mean, on the surface, it seems like it's, focused on boosting domestic manufacturing, bringing jobs back to the U.S.
Right.
But there was also this very calculated political strategy happening at the same time.
Yeah, there was.
So help me understand like this political strategy a little bit better.
Well, a lot of those manufacturing jobs that Trump was really focused on were concentrated in areas like the Rust Belt, which played a huge part in his election.
Okay.
So by promising to like revitalize these industries, he was essentially solidifying his base.
So the automotive industry, especially imports from places like Korea, became like a focal point in this strategy.
It did, and that's where like the tariffs that Trump proposed really come in. So you've got a potential 25% on cars from Mexico and Canada.
Wow.
And then possibly 10 to 20% on other countries, including Korea.
Right.
Now, Korea currently faces a 2.5% tariff.
Okay.
So this was meant to really shift the balance, right?
Yeah.
Make American-made cars more competitive and encourage companies to produce domestically.
Right, but it
wasn't that straightforward.
It's not as simple as that because these tariffs also could have like a huge impact on Korea.
Oh, absolutely.
Which was already exporting a record number of vehicles to the U.S. at that time.
Right.
I mean, even a small increase in tariffs could cut into like profit margins.
Right.
And make Korean cars more expensive for American consumers.
Exactly. And on top of all of that, you had Trump like publicly expressing his dissatisfaction with the trade imbalance between the U.S. and Korea.
Right.
Like he was basically saying, Korea was sending way more cars to the U.S. Than it was importing back in return.
So it was like this multi-layered challenge for Korea.
Yeah.
They had to grapple with these potential tariffs. A president who's openly critical of this trade relationship and the need to adapt their strategies in this like rapidly changing environment.
Yeah, they had to figure out how to...
That's a lot to juggle.
It was a lot. And this is actually where we see like the rise of hybrid vehicles as a potential solution for Korean automakers.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah.
What made hybrids so attractive in this scenario?
So there's a few key factors. So first you have to remember hybrids with their, combo of gas and electric power.
Right.
They were generally seen as more fuel efficient than like traditional gas-powered cars.
Oh, yeah.
This meant they often face lower tariff risks.
Gotcha.
Second, at the time, there was like a lot of uncertainty surrounding the future of government subsidies for electric vehicles.
Right.
So hybrids offered kind of like a more affordable, readily available alternative to fully electric vehicle.
Makes sense.
Which were still pretty expensive at the time and lacked that widespread charging infrastructure.
Yeah, for sure. So it seems like Korean automakers like Hyundai were kind of hedging their bets.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
By focusing on hybrids. They were appealing to those American consumers who were like increasingly interested in fuel efficiency.
Right.
But they weren't quite ready to make that jump to full EVs.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they were navigating these like choppy waters of U.S. trade policy.
Yeah.
By minimizing their exposure to those potential tariffs.
Precisely. And it wasn't even just like a passive response.
Okay.
Hyundai specifically.
Yeah.
They were really proactive in their approach.
Okay.
They made a strategic decision to ramp up local production of their hybrid models in the U.S.
So by producing those cars directly in the U.S., they were further reducing their vulnerability to tariffs.
Exactly.
And also demonstrating a commitment to the American market.
Right.
It seems like such a smart approach.
It was.
Hitting all these different angles.
Yeah, they were appealing to consumer demand. They were strategically navigating all these policy changes. And they were really positioning themselves within that global supply chain to mitigate risks.
That's really interesting.
And it really highlights the adaptability and foresight of these Korean automakers like Hyundai. They weren't just reacting to the challenges. They were actively shaping their future in this rapidly evolving industry.
But I imagine, even with a really good strategy, it couldn't have been easy.
No, it wasn't.
The U.S. automotive market is incredibly competitive.
It is.
You've got all these major players all vying for market share.
Absolutely. You're right.
It was a tough environment. And then the political landscape adds another layer of complexity.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Trump's protectionist policies were really sending ripples throughout that entire global automotive industry.
Yeah.
It was creating all this uncertainty.
It did.
And it was forcing companies to really rethink their long-term strategies.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've been talking about this whole interplay between politics, economics, and the automotive industry.
Yeah.
But let's bring it back to our listener for a second.
Okay.
Why should they care about all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question.
How does all this connect back to everyday life?
So I think it's important to remember that these issues actually impact all of us, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah.
The decisions that governments make,
Right.
the decisions that large corporations make, they have a really direct effect on the products we buy, the jobs we hold, and even the overall health of our economy.
Yeah, it's we're all kind of passengers on this wild ride of globalization, and understanding the forces at play can help us make more informed choices as consumers and citizens.
I agree.
It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge.
I think that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
It's about developing those critical thinking skills and not just accepting the narratives that are presented to us at face value. We need to dig a little deeper, question those assumptions.
For sure.
Consider different perspectives.
Yeah.
And really form our own conclusions.
Yeah.
Based on, thoughtful analysis of the information available to us.
And that's exactly what we try to do here on the Deep Dive.
That's right. Yeah.
We want to give our listeners the tools and perspectives they need to navigate this complex world with a sense of clarity and understanding.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And hopefully inspire them to engage in these conversations and contribute to shaping a future that benefits everyone.
I love that. Beautifully put.
Thanks.
So as we're wrapping up our deep dive into the Korean automotive industry, what are some key takeaways you hope our listener will walk away with?
So I think one of the biggest takeaways is that the global economy is interconnected in ways we often don't even grasp.
Yeah.
Actions taken in one country can have profound and often unintended consequences for businesses and individuals all over the world.
Cool.
Those ripple effects can be felt far and wide.
It's a powerful reminder that we're all part of this larger system.
We are.
Our choices, whether as consumers, business leaders, or policymakers, they have consequences that extend way beyond our immediate sphere of influence.
Right. Another takeaway is that strategic brilliance demonstrated by these Korean automakers, Hyundai in particular, during this period.
Right.
I mean, they faced immense challenges.
They did.
Potential tariffs, trade tensions, a fiercely competitive market.
Right.
But they rose to the occasion with innovative solutions and a willingness to adapt.
Yeah, their story is
it's inspiring.
a really inspiring example of resilience.
Yeah.
And strategic thinking. They weren't content with just weathering the storm.
Right.
They actively sought out ways to not just survive, but thrive.
Right.
In the face of all this uncertainty.
Exactly. And I hope our listener will come away from this
Yeah.
with a sense of empowerment.
That's a good one.
Yeah, by understanding the forces at play in the global economy.
Right.
By like recognizing the interconnectedness of these issues and by sharpening those critical thinking skills, we can make more informed decisions.
For sure.
And contribute to creating a future that we can all like feel good about.
It's about taking ownership of our role.
It is.
In shaping a world that's, more equitable, sustainable, and prosperous for everyone.
I agree.
So it's been really fascinating unpacking this whole situation with the Korean automotive industry.
It has.
I mean, we've seen how these political agendas and like economic policies are all intertwined.
Right.
We've seen how tariffs are like this leverage tool.
Yeah.
And we've seen how companies like Hyundai really had to adapt and innovate to thrive.
Absolutely. And, this is just one example,
Right.
a much larger story that's playing out on this global stage.
For sure.
I mean, the same dynamics that we've talked about, they're impacting so many other industries. Manufacturing, technology, agriculture, you name it.
Yeah.
Political maneuvering, and these economic policies, they're constantly reshaping the landscape of global trade.
Right.
And creating like winners and losers along the way.
And it can feel really overwhelming to like keep up with all of these interconnected issues, especially for someone who's not immersed in like the world of economics and international trade.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But that's why I think developing like those critical thinking skills is so crucial. You don't have to be an expert to ask like the important questions.
Right.
So like when you hear about a new trade policy or a tariff being imposed, just take a second to think about it. Who stands to benefit from this decision?
Right.
What are like the potential downsides?
Yeah.
Are there any like unintended consequences? And are there any perspectives missing from this whole conversation?
It's about being like an active participant in the flow of information.
Absolutely.
Not just a passive recipient.
I agree. Yeah.
We can all like do our part to be more informed consumers of news.
Right.
And like make sure we're getting the full picture.
Exactly. And remember, there's always more to the story than what you see on the surface.
Right.
Every decision has trade-offs.
Yeah.
And there are very rarely easy or straightforward answers.
For sure.
It's about navigating that complexity.
Right.
And understanding like the nuances of these global systems.
Okay, so as we're leaving our listener with all of this food for thought, I want to leave them with like one final question.
Okay.
We've seen how those Korean automakers adapted to all the challenges they faced.
Right.
But like zooming out to the bigger picture, how do you think this interplay between political agendas and these economic policies will shape like the future of the global automotive industry as a whole?
That's like the million-dollar question.
Right.
It's impossible to like predict with any certainty.
Yeah.
But there are some possibilities to think about.
Right.
Will we see a shift toward regionalization?
Okay.
With like companies focusing on producing and selling within like specific geographic blocks.
Interesting.
Will those protectionist measures become even more widespread, creating barriers to trade and potentially slowing down global economic growth?
Right.
Or could we even see like a surge in international collaboration and a move toward more open and equitable trade agreements?
So many possibilities. And the answers will likely unfold in like these complex and unexpected ways.
They will.
But as we've seen today, by taking a deep dive into these issues, by engaging in like these thoughtful discussions, and by challenging ourselves to think critically,
absolutely,
we can start to make sense of this ever-changing world.
And that's what makes this journey of continuous learning so rewarding.
Yeah.
There's always something new to discover, something more to understand, and a chance to contribute to shaping a better future.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking.
I did.
And remember, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deeper into the issues that matter most to you.
I will.